I'm going to pass over to him to sort of fill in the gaps of his introduction. Everybody, please give him a super warm welcome.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. My name's Dave. I'm head of delivery at a Databricks consultancy called Unifeye. My career has been very agile, project, product, delivery focused. And more recently, it's become more and more AI influenced, I would say, at the very least, and a lot more AI driven in some ways. That was the premise of my talk last time, where I talked about AI powered Agile. And this is going to be a little bit of almost a drilling down of that. Instead of thinking of Agile generally, I'm going to take lean UX as a concept and dive in on that and look at the ways that AI is having an effect here, some of the ways it's changing things, but more importantly, how it's reinforcing a lot of good ideas that we've had all along, and a lot of older ideas are now coming back to the fore. So I hope this will be interesting. As Roy said, he's got a lot of good speakers lined up in the pipeline. Unfortunately, you'll have to make do with me this evening. If you've got any questions, please jump in as we go, and I'll try and leave some time at the end. But I suppose let's get cracking. So the agenda's fairly fast and loose. We'll do a bit of a refresh on lean UX. We'll talk about the approach I'm outlining that I'm calling Vibe UX. We'll look at how that evolves the traditional lean UX principles, practices, and ideas. And then we'll look at how we can go beyond lean UX. So we'll zoom right into lean UX, then broaden out again based on this Vibe UX approach. And then hopefully a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. Before I really get into it, does everyone know what I'm talking about when I talk about lean UX? Has anyone not read the book? Put your hand up and be shamed. So lean UX was the brainchild of Josh Gottelf and his colleague Josh Seiden. I should know that. But this was very much around human-centered design and putting humans, users, and customers at the center of what you do in terms of delivery, and not focusing so much on the technical capability that you enable or what cool stuff the technology can do, how that makes a difference in the lives of your users, customers, and stakeholders. It was built on 3 core foundations. Does anyone who's read the book remember what they are? I know none of you have read it now, you're all liars. But it was built on 3 core pillars, and those were lean startup, design thinking, and agile software development. Specifically, the Agile Manifesto was what it really cared about, and the principles and values there. And from these 3, Josh refined a bit of an approach where they had human-centered design, focused on a few different things, but primarily we're talking about things like hypothesis-driven design, not working to rigid specs and highly detailed specs anymore, thinking about a hypothesis on what's going to provide customer value and how can we technically embody that and get it in front of customers to check it out. Minimum viable products. I know everyone's got a bit of a love-hate relationship with MVPs now, but these guys really formalized it in a nice way of how you can get something in front of customers to act as a learning vehicle before you then take that forward into a full-fledged product. Faster validated learning and that outcomes focus are really the core mantras of this book. We want to be able to learn as fast as we can about what our customers want and what's going to make their lives easier. And then we want to be thinking about how we can get outputs, products, and things in front of them to enable those outcomes the customers are looking for. So a little bit more of focus on, and you might be surprised to hear this from me if you connected it was on LinkedIn, because I talk a lot about how as Agilists, as Scrum people, as delivery people, delivery should be priority number 1. AI tools are really changing the equation on this now, though. Delivery is becoming cheaper and easier to do. And now you need to think about not just delivering things, delivering really good things. And lean UX is sort of the holy grail for me in terms of turning delivery in and of itself into really good delivery. So if anyone hasn't read it, I'd really recommend checking that out. But this was not a perfect solution. And there's now limitations. And I say limitations a little bit softly because a lot of this is to do with the way the appetite's changed for delivery and software products now. We're sort of used to having really quick user-focused sessions that we can derive requirements from, figure out what sort of outcomes we want to enable for our customers and move things forward. But as we've got used to that over time, the appetite for increased speed keeps going up and up and up. So discovery now is sort of slow, even for Agile teams. You might spend days or weeks validating hypothesis, testing things out before then taking it into build or deciding to kill the idea. And you still hit bottlenecks going from that discovery process into delivery. I'm assuming everyone's ran into these kind of problems before. If not, don't worry, you will. It's a matter of time. But this is what's sort of given birth to this Vibe UX idea for me. And when I think about the key insight from this talk is, AI, I don't think is replacing anyone yet. I don't think it's really going to displace tons of us. It increases your sort of strength, power, capabilities as an individual contributor. But ultimately, it's not removing the need for the good sort of stuff that Lean UX really canvases for. Things like product thinking, things like user experience, and things like validating user needs as early as you can. But what it is doing is lowering the barrier to that expectation to a point now where I think if you're not doing it, you really are doing yourself a disservice, because it's become so cheap and easy to run these kind of experiments now. And the key thing that's driving this is this vibe coding. Is anyone in here a vibe coder, or has anyone given it a try? Does anyone love it? Does anyone hate it? There's a real mixed bag. But ultimately, I think at this point, and I said this in my talk a couple of years ago, these tools are here to stay. And I can't see a future where this doesn't become part of what we do in some way. I think it's going to be around. All sorts of tools, all sorts of ideas. As I say, I don't think it's perfect, not replacing anyone, but definitely going to have an impact. It's democratizing a lot of technical skills to a point, but I think in much more real ways, it's really incentivizing real technical skills and real programming ability. I talked with someone a few weeks ago who was talking about vibe coding a solution for a school that he serves as a governor of a board on. And he asked us, was it sensible to put details in basically PII data for the kids at the school into a vibe coded solution? Any real developers in the room will probably see immediately why that's a disastrous idea and why you'll end up on the front of the Times for that. So I think there is a little bit of flattering to deceive in terms of what's possible here, but having those real technical skills, these type of tools really expand the surface area of what's possible for you. And again, the bottom's a bit of a description I've come up with, and I think that this ties in quite nicely with a lot of the Lean UX ideas. It allows you to be more instinct-driven with this AI-assisted software development tooling. You can now build on things like your own curiosity, how you feel about solutions. It's so cheap to try things in a different color, to rearrange the UI, to think about the user flow and move it around. You can really go with that gut instinct a lot more instead of having to get ideas in front of development teams, then wait days for it to come back and see how it really looks. And curiosity is really the thing that can drive you now. You don't need to think, do I really want to burn development time testing this idea out? You don't need to worry about that anymore, which I think is the really liberating thing about these tools. So for anyone who's not tried it, this is a sort of typical workflow on a tool called Lovable. If you've used ChatGPT, the interface is very similar. It takes in a prompt in a box like that. And I believe the technical term is voodoo or black magic happens behind the scenes in these tools, and they'll spit you back an application. And this was one that I did for a Monte Carlo forecaster for Kanban. I talked about this last time. You can spin a Monte Carlo forecaster up now in a matter of seconds, which would have taken days of programming effort before. So really impressive stuff. What this does is it allows us to take Lean UX and take those couple of steps forward to what I'm now calling Vibe UX. So we take the sort of core premises of Lean UX, those three core pillars, the principles and ideas, wrap that in AI-powered tooling, and we unlock a lot of different things. Top left is the most important one for me. The distance between idea and work and product now, we're talking minutes to seconds instead of days, weeks and months now, which gives you a lot more sort of ammunition and firepower in terms of the output that you can get out there. Your feedback loops in that sense become immediate. You don't need to take a customer request into a team, put that into a 2-week sprint and come back to them a fortnight later and then they've changed their mind. You can do it now straight away we could have a session where I'm sat on Lovable, the customer sat next to me, and every 5 or 6 seconds I'm making changes to an application. So hugely liberating in that way. As we've touched on, the cost and barriers to hypothesis validation have never been lower. If this doesn't encourage you to experiment, I don't think anything will at this point. There's literally no barrier to getting stuck in now. And all those cycles that we've learned about before, Lean UX talks a lot about the double diamond that I had on screen earlier, or we think about things like think, make, check, build, measure, learn. Those cycles are now collapsed in a way that's incredible, and every sort of step of those cycles now falls into each other, where a build leads to a measure, leads to a learn, leads to a build. And these cycles are happening more and more rapidly and more frequently, which increases the surface area for learning for you as an individual contributor. But then if you extrapolate that out to a team, the amount of learning that can take place at a team level now is really frightening in some ways. So that's how we go from Lean UX to Vibe UX by wrapping it in AI. What the really nice thing about this is, though, it builds on those core Lean UX principles, the core ideas that we always had there. and really intensifies them in a way that allows you to take them to the next level. Lean UX sketched out 3 levels of principles for teams, cultures, and process. I've got those on the screen now, but what I'm going to do is cycle through them and show you how, even though this AI tooling's new, it does a lot of different stuff, it really changes the game in some ways. These foundational principles stay evergreen, and if anything, we can drive these home in much more meaningful and effective ways now with this type of tooling. So team principles. From Lean UX, we're looking at things like cross-functional teams, small dedicated co-located teams, self-sufficient and empowered teams, problem-focused teams. As Agilists, I'd hope this is coming straight from the song sheet of things that you care about and things that you want to drive home in your teams. And the AI-powered tooling that we're talking about really enables this in a lot of different ways. Cross-functionality with these tools, I talk a lot about even having access to something as simple as an LLM. If I think of my T-shaped skills, I'll have certain peaks and troughs. All of those troughs, with me having access to an LLM, immediately get ratcheted up a few levels. It's not going to be perfect knowledge, it's not a perfect oracle, but I am much more capable across a broad range of problem solving now than I am without that core LLM. And we take that forward into these coding focused tools, again, across the broad landscape of what's available through programming and software development. With this type of tool at my disposal, I'm a much more higher level T-shaped skilled person. And again, we can extrapolate that to the team level and think about that skill spread throughout a team as well. Co-location, being small and dedicated, these type of tools make all of your individual contributors a lot more powerful, versatile, and able to do more with less, which means our teams can become smaller, more focused, more potent. And this co-location piece at the time was probably the right thing, but the collaboration tooling has come a long way since then. And these type of tools like Lovable allow us to create the outputs and assets and product increments in a way that they can now serve as a bit of a digital co-location tool. We don't need to get together in the ways that we did to talk about products that we might create or might not create, because the price of creating them and seeing what you think is so much lower than it was before now. Self-sufficient and empowered. These type of tools that allow you to elevate your skills on demand and give you knowledge on demand, skills on demand, empower you in much more meaningful ways. And that problem-focused team. When the cost of experimentation is this low, you can try hundreds of solutions over the course of a week on the same problem and see which one sticks. It's much more easy to now drill down into a customer problem that you really care about, or a customer problem that you want to provide some value to, and rapidly try different things instead of tying yourself to a technical specification or tying yourself to success criteria that you want to hit targets that you know you can hit. You can be a lot more ambiguous in terms of the goals and the setting of that now. And a lot of this comes down to, again, the talk called Vibe UX. It's about doing things on feel, on instinct, on curiosity. And you can commit yourself now to much more of those ambiguous goals because the price of producing the output that might get you closer to them is so much lower than it was before. That's it in terms of team principles. For culture principles, lots of different ones in there. I'll call out a few of the key ones. So Lean UX talked a lot about moving from output towards outcomes. And this is sort of a callback to the earlier point I made around going from delivery to good delivery. We're now thinking about not only getting the product out as described, we're now thinking about getting a product out there, but does it ultimately achieve the goal that this customer wants to achieve with this project, this product, this initiative? Vibe UX gives you, that, as we're talking about, that hugely increased surface area for learning and experimentation. So ultimately, not only can you create a better fitted product, you've got more at-bats to take chances, make mistakes, and learn from things, because the speed at which you can put those right and harness that learning along the way is amplified from where it was before. Again, sort of a core Agile idea, mantra, and principle that I think we can embody now in a much more meaningful way. Removing waste, good sort of lean practice. And in some ways, I'm not convinced these tools do remove waste, but I think they make the price of waste incredibly low compared to what it was before. And it sort of comes back to that debate between efficiency and effectiveness. We can be efficient doing the wrong thing, but if we can get to a point where we're so effective now at creating this output, the efficiency becomes sort of a moot point. And I think that's where we get to with the removal of waste here. The waste is so low, it's so easy to put right and so throwaway in nature. We don't need to worry about it as much as we did before. There's not that thought pattern of, is this really worth putting into a sprint and dedicating developer effort to for a fortnight, when we can just get cracking and in a matter of minutes prove it out, yes or no. Shared understanding. This was a very big point in Lean UX where they would talk about doing things like getting ideas out of your head and getting them onto a Miro board, for example, or a physical whiteboard, or also doing things like paper prototypes, making applications on pieces of paper, having different screens with different pieces of connected paper. All of those proxies for shared understanding and value sort of disappear now. We don't need to worry about those because we can just get straight to creating that digital product and software product now. So again, we're getting closer and closer to the real thing almost immediately. And the final one around permission to fail. It's sort of it links into all sorts of good things in Agile circles around psychological safety and experimentation. Again, when the cost is this low, the price of failure comes down naturally with it. The price of failure now is ultra low, and the ability to change direction, to reverse these experiments, to go back when we need to take steps back, to run multiple competitive analysis and do A/B testing on different ideas before we commit to a real product. All of these good things are coming from these type of tools. Final principle pack is around process principles. Again, Lean UX sketched out quite a few. Just to cover off these in a bit of a rapid fire fashion, working in small batches to mitigate risk. Your batches now can be incredibly small and the time investment for them smaller than ever. We can test out new features in multiple ways in a matter of minutes. Continuous discovery, Vibe UX and tooling like this makes discovery the currency of your team now. It's not only about how quickly you can deliver good working product, it's about how quickly you can expand on that in interesting and creative ways that your customers care about and ultimately are prepared to pay for. GOOB, that means getting out of your brain. And this is about taking ideas, getting them out into the open so that you can test them out with other people, see what they think of them. These type of tools enable you to go not only from idea to being out in the open, to idea to real product, ready to go, give it a try and tell me what you think. Externalizing your work, very similar sort of theme, similar sort of idea. We don't need to have all these proxies for product development anymore. We don't need to have large elaborate specs up front, large elaborate whiteboard, user flows, user mapping journeys, when it's this easy to create the product and see what the people think of the product. And getting out with the deliverables business. This is a trend that you'll see, I think, if anyone's working in consultancy or consultancy style operations. There's a big trend now, instead of thinking about can we agree a spec with a customer and deliver to that spec, it's much more about now taking a customer problem and finding a way to solve that problem. And I think that these tools are going to sort of drive that forward even more now. Instead of thinking a customer wants a CRM product to do X, Y, Z, we can now think more deliberately about the problem they have and come to them with a selection or a buffet of options and then probe for further feedback on where we think we can go from there based on that buffet of options available to them. So there's a lot of similarities between traditional Lean UX and what I'm calling Vibe UX. The principles are more or less the same. There's the same values around reducing risk, around amplifying learning at every level that you can. The accelerated feedback loops are the key thing. It's so much quicker now to, as we've always said in sort of product management and Agile circles, getting real stuff in front of customers to get real feedback. That's never been faster, which means your learning and experimentation cycles are sort of becoming mandatory at this point. If you aren't embedding really good learning and experimentation cycles, it's a matter of time until competitors can really outpace you. A lot of sort of, Kobe Bryant, who's a famous basketball player, was a great example of this. He used to talk about over the course of years, if he puts in 2 or 3 more hours a day than his competition do, by the time 5 years have passed, they can't make up that ground anymore. And I think that we are at sort of the genesis of that. If you can't embrace these tools in a meaningful way, 5 or 6 years down the line, you're naturally going to be behind where the organizations and teams that do take these forward are going to be. And just as a bit of a callback, when we think about the key things that Lean UX talked about hypothesis-driven design, minimal viable products to accelerate learning, faster validated learning, and outcomes focus. But all of these core ideas, principles, practices that Lean UX was really driving at, Vibe UX drives even faster towards these and sort of incentivizes these in a way that makes it a formality that you would do them. Moving forward from there, there's a lot of ideas that you can get off and run with, but it's very important to fit these tools to the right kind of problems. These really shine when we're thinking about things like toy applications, like proof of concepts, like personal tools. And in a lot of ways, I think that's what these AI-driven tools are doing, allowing us to create our own tools to do our jobs more effectively, and even create tools for those tools to allow you to hyper-specialize those for the task at hand. Sense making and complexity, as we talked about, it's now easier than ever to get real products in front of real customers and make some sense out of what it is that's going to move the needle for them. I talk a lot about murdering your options. Lean UX was great at getting ideas out there in the open and getting ideas on paper. It was also great at creating a situation where you couldn't see the forest for the trees because you were spoiled for choice. This type of tooling makes it really easy to get products in front of customers, and if they think they're crap, they'll just say it straight away because they know that you haven't invested anything in these. There's not that psychological pressure where a customer's thinking, these guys have worked on this for 3 months, I need to give them something good. If I've only worked on it for 10 seconds, they're much more likely to say, that's shit, forget about it. Really good. Competitive analysis I talked about, because we can spin these up in seconds. In the course of a day, you could have 4 or 5 options, come back to a customer the next day and say, based on these 4 or 5, where am I heading in the right direction? Accelerating learning, I've talked about a lot, so I won't flog a dead horse. One thing I've seen really go down well, and I'm thinking in sessions, if you're a Scrum team, in sessions like sprint reviews and retrospectives, are these cross-functional, high engagement, refinement and planning sessions. You can take an increment of your product now, and especially in planning, for example, so you've got different sprint goals you're trying to pick from or different directions you could go in your next time box. It's very easy now to take that increment and put AI on the top of it and sort of start experimenting and maybe take the sort of low-hanging fruit from the sprint that you've got coming up and say, okay, if we do this, how does this affect the next follow-on task? What options does this open up for us in future? And these are really good, not only for thinking about your product as a living thing and how you can evolve it, but for those really engaging high investment sessions within the team where you're really harnessing the intelligence of every member of the team and bringing everyone in to contribute in a much more meaningful way. That's when it shines. There's a lot of places where it doesn't. And I want to be honest, these tools are great, but they do need to be approached with a level of sort of skepticism and pragmatism, I would say. Hallucinations, I'm sure everyone's ran into. And when I look at these tools as coding tools, there's sort of a core inability of these tools to lower entropy within the systems that they work on. Does everyone know what I mean by that? So when I talk about entropy, I'm talking about sort of randomness and chaos within the code base. And the problem that there's another problem on here that I've got straight underneath that, where I talk about scalability, extensibility, and teamwork. These tools are not great at building code bases in a way that makes them easy to scale, extend, and bring other members of the team into work on. They build in horrible, disgusting ways as a software engineer that you would never do yourself, which makes them very quick to get stuff out the door. Doesn't make it very quick for you to take a POC and hand it over to your team and say, okay, I want you to do X, Y, Z to it now, without major refactoring and major robustness injection into these tools. Tar pit and mirage ideas. It's very easy to fall in love with your own creations with these. And that's why it's very good to get a lot of direct user feedback where you can, especially honest and frank user feedback. It's very easy as a non-techie person to think, wow, I've created a piece of code. I am the next coming of John Carmack. I'm going to make the next Doom. You're probably not. I hate to break your heart. And I'd resist the temptation to fall in love with these ideas. And especially when we're talking about things like tar pit ideas, there's a reason that they are tar pits. A lot of people have tried and a lot of people have failed. You've got to really look at your solutions and your creations in the cold light of day where you can. Security's a big one there, and I've put in brackets, prompts are not enough. You cannot get around the security constraints of these type of tools by saying, please make this application secure. That is not going to cut it, I'm afraid. You need real technical programming skill to validate that the AI is doing what you think it does. And AI is a tremendous liar. What it'll do to you is it'll say, okay, no problem, I've made that secure. It's not going to tell you I haven't done it. But you ultimately need to be the driver, providing that supervisory layer over the top and validating what you think it's doing lines up with what it's actually done. The top right's an interesting one here, that gambling nature of just one more prompt. This is a pattern I see happening again a lot with the non-technical users. You invest 10, 15 minutes into these products and you start thinking, okay, if I get just one more prompt, if it does this one more thing, and that cycle never ends, I'm afraid to tell you. You'll always be thinking, if I can just get one more prompt out of this, I can revolutionize it. And I think a lot of this is in the nature of these tools. They are set up a little bit like social media, not carousels, like the column format of a social media app deliberately to make them more of that sort of gambling interface where you're getting the dopamine hits when it works and not necessarily when it doesn't. And I think it incentivizes you in a very similar way that gambling acts are incentivized by gambling applications. Something to be aware of, and something I think we'll see more of as legislation catches up with these AI companies around how they are maybe incentivizing negative user behaviors there. And the final one on the bottom right, it really doesn't work well, these tools, if you don't have real users giving you real feedback. Because as you know, when you talk to any AI tool, whatever you say, you are absolutely right. This is the best idea ever, and you're going to make all the money in the world. And I'm going to sell these t-shirts out the back of my car at the end of the session. If anyone else is tired of being absolutely right, I have a t-shirt with your name on it. Okay, stepping forward from there. Lots of practical safeguards that you can lean on here. I'll just rattle through these fairly quick fire. Human in the loop early and often. Try to resist the urge to have these solutions in your universe and not get them exposed to real user feedback. The more people that you can bring in, the more rich feedback you can bake into these, and make sure that you're not going to create something that's going to fall apart at the first contact with customers. Prompt, prototype, peer review is sort of a cycle that I'm advocating for now. Great to prompt something, great to get a prototype together. The sooner you can get it reviewed by someone else, the better, just so that you resist that urge to fall in love with your own ideas. Time boxing your tinkering. As I say, you need to be ruthless with your time because the cost of making changes and continuing forever is so low. You need to give yourself sort of hard and fast blocks and constraints that you're going to work within with these tools. Using the right tool for the right job at hand. I see a lot of people trying to ChatGPT everything, and that was appropriate, I think, 2 or 3 years ago when ChatGPT was the clear leader. You're seeing more and more now what I thought would happen all along, a rich spectrum of AI-powered tools and technologies that have different specializations for different jobs. I think not only is it worth it for you at a practical level to get an awareness of what these different tools are, you'll be able to tweak, refine, retrofit these into your job in a much more meaningful and effective way if you have a broader understanding of the tool landscape and environment at large. Separate your throwaway and prod code. And this, I think, comes back to that MVP discussion that I had earlier. I think a lot of people have a love-hate MVP relationship. The key thing for me with these type of products is they are very rarely, if ever, going to be in a state where you can take sort of a POC that you've proved out with a tool like Lovable, hand that to a development team and say, okay, let's just build it from here. I think this really does come back to, we use these as learning vehicles to learn about customer needs, to validate customer problems, to get a hypothesis on where value lives. What it doesn't give us is really solid technical foundations to build on and steal a march on that initial discovery or that initial sort of technical setup that needs to happen for good development practices and good long-lived products. And the final one, a little bit of a hack that I've sort of run into, is document your learning with these, and you can use these AI tools to do that for you. So based on our vibe coding session over the last 2 hours, create an output of what we've tried, what was good, what was bad. Store that somewhere in your repository of choice, Confluence, ADO, wherever it may be, and then continually feed that back into these tools, LLMs, AI-powered coding assistants, and that creates a really rich learning cycle for the tool to build up additional context. And I think what you'll hear a lot more recently is about this thing called context engineering. And the more that you can give relevant and broad context to these tools and the problems you're trying to solve and the things that you want to do, the better the results that you'll get out of them. And using these tools to create that context to then feed back in is a really nice way to broaden your horizons and get more effective results from them there. Okay, there's a few different ways we can go beyond vibe coding with lean UX. This is the values from the Agile Manifesto I hope everyone recognizes. Lots of different ways that we can build on these. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. These tools are incentivizing the interactions in a way that the tools become less and less relevant. Working software over comprehensive documentation, I would hope, is self-evident. The working software now is the driver of that conversation. The vibing lets customers see and shape faster, and that means that we're incentivized to work with them over that contract negotiation piece. And responding to changeover following a plan, it's never been cheaper to pivot your ideas to go in a different direction to follow your curiosity instead of following the original plan. Scrum and Kanban, I think, are also going to change. Scrum in a lot of ways has done quite well for quite a while, but I think it's beginning to transform now into something else. The events are becoming far and far less formal, and you'll have seen this if you've worked in any sort of mob or ensemble programming setups previously. You don't need those formal retrospectives, those formal planning sessions, when the conversation is as constant as a mob or an ensemble programming setup. This is going to incentivize more of that. The roles are going to blur. I don't think we're going to have formal Scrum Masters in the way that we did 3 to 5 years ago. I think there's going to be more and more of an emphasis on these sort of cross-functional, multi-skilled people who can wear different hats as the situation calls. The sprint review becomes less and less of a formal event, and I think it'll become constant the more that we can use these to spin out products really quickly and just work with a customer side by side. That sprint review cycle becomes the conversation, and the backlogs are going to become much leaner and speedy. I think the days of having items in your backlog that are months and years old is just going to be history. I think in the future, if you've got items in your backlog that are weeks old, they're probably stale by that point. Kanban also is going to do a lot of things differently, I think. I think the WIP limits now, instead of being at the task level, will probably be around the learning cycle that you're trying to go through. So the work in progress is around what experiments we're running, what trials we want to go through. The speed of flow is going to increase dramatically. And I think if you think of things like flow metrics, like cycle time, throughput, work in progress, work item age, these are going to sort of not naturally go up. I think cycle time throughput is going to go up incredibly. I think work item age is going to come down incredibly. So your benchmarks and opinions on what those good metrics look like is probably going to change too. Less columns, less work states. There's no real need to have those formal stages in the workflow when getting from idea to product is so quick. And the AI-assisted workflow improvement. Not only do you need to think as a practitioner about how to improve your value delivery system and your Kanban system, you should be asking the tools and products that you work with how you can make it easier for them to contribute in a more meaningful way, because they'll have opinions as well on how you can make things easier for them to contribute. Last sort of thing for me is around personal vibing. And I think that this is really for everyone, not just in the technology, the Agile scene, but everyone, this is really where these tools are going to shine, is in creating your own tools to do your own jobs and solve your own problems in more meaningful ways. I've created a load of different things with Lovable. The first one was a vibe-coded video game that does all sorts of different things, but it focuses mainly on Scrum values and Kanban flow metrics. So this is a really hyper-personalized learning journey that anyone can go through. And I can see communities of practice using these to sort of spread good ideas within an organization or bring in new practices and principles that could set up these in a matter of minutes now. The Monte Carlo forecaster that I talked about earlier, this is a tool that all of us can use within these Agile and delivery circles, and you can spin tools like this up in a matter of minutes as well. This was a Lego Serious Play facilitation tool I used. Created a digital version of a Lego Serious Play facilitation series. This took maybe a day or two. Again, a tool that you can use within your teams to drive valuable conversations and increase the effectiveness of the team. And the final thing I'd talk about, does anyone know what this is? Stormtrooper, but he's also a clone. And I think that this is the future of software as a service, as I see it. I think instead of now you going out into the market looking for a tool that can help you do the job you want to do, you might look at the existing SaaS offerings, for example, Miro, and you might wish that Miro integrated with Spotify for some reason. Instead of you now needing to go to Miro and ask them to do that, you can just clone Miro and do it yourself. And I think that this is the future of SaaS in a lot of different ways. And it's probably going to lead to the sunsetting of this SaaS era that we've all been living in. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Final thing, the problem I solved this week with Lovable was around a learning journey and sort of pressure testing my knowledge on Lovable, because I want to see if there's anywhere else I can squeeze more value. The tool I created this week was a Lovable certification engine. I've got a link to this at the end if anyone wants to try it out and learn a bit more about Lovable and hopefully start you on this vibe coding journey yourself. Please check it out. And I think that brings us towards the end. So in terms of UX tooling, these are the 4 broad categories I talked about. For ideation, basically your LLM of choice, any LLM you want can give you those ideas, give you a lot of options to work with. For visual prototyping, Miro and Figma are the ones that are really winning at the minute. And Miro integrates really well with these tools. Now you don't even need to prompt these solutions to build your code. You can tell the solution, like Lovable, go and look at my Miro board here and build what's there. It doesn't even need to be told what it is you're working on. It can figure that all out from context, which is interesting. Code prototyping, the 3 big ones, Replit, Lovable, Base 44. Those are the 3 I would really care about. If anyone is development focused in the road, Claude Code is the best of the best in terms of software AI assisted tooling. And that documents knowledge and context, basically any repo of choice, and periodically feed that back into these tools that you're working on based on the experiments that you're running. And I think that brings us towards the end. So my sort of takeaway message on this is please start vibing. Please give this a go. Don't be afraid. And I think it is going to be here to stay for us. And that's about it. Sorry, I think I've overrun by a couple of minutes, but I hope that was useful. But if you've got any questions, happy to take them.
Sure, clap first.